Channel open. Welcome back to WeeklyTrek, a proud member of the Tricorder Transmissions podcast network, and presented in partnership with TrekCore.com. I am your host, Alex Perry.
What's today's date? The date.
Today's show was recorded on April 23rd, 2021, and is current through Star Trek Discovery Season 3, so beware of spoilers. All right, let's get into the show.
Good day, Voyager, and welcome to A Briefing with Neelix. It's a catchy title, isn't it?
WeeklyTrek is a 30-minute news show covering the biggest stories from the Star Trek franchise. We are in a new golden age of Star Trek. There are multiple television shows in production, possibly more on the way, and enough merchandise to fill the Bajoran wormhole. So stick with me, and I'll help you sort the real facts from a lot of the Dominion propaganda that you'll find online. But I can't do this alone. And my guest this week is returning guest Jamie McGregor. Jamie, welcome back to WeeklyTrek.
Thanks, Alex. Hope you're well. Great to be back talking to you about all things Trek, again on one of my favorite podcasts, WeeklyTrek.
Well, I do appreciate that, Jamie, and you know the drill. I want to know something that's got you excited about Star Trek at the moment. What's got you moving at Warp 10?
Well, you usually do ask for something that's got someone excited for a Warp 10 thing straight off the top of the podcast. But as we all know, Warp 10, really what it does is it causes you to go crazy, turn into a lizard and have salamander babies with your boss, right? So
Yes,
I'm going to take that aspect and talk about how Michael Dorn got the entire fandom moving at Warp 10 and going a little nuts over the past week. Of course, Michael Dorn tweeting about being back in Starfleet, #ad, and which I think got people a little bit more excited than they perhaps should have been. Those of us who are a little bit more used to taking things with a grain of salt weren't necessarily as disappointed, but it seems to be for the game Star Trek Legends, which I think is an Apple Arcade-only game. Now, Trek gaming is kind of one of my really big blind spots as a Trek fan, but I've seen a few people kind of tweet about it, and it looks kind of cool. I'm also one of those people massively caught up in the Apple infrastructure, you know, one of those people that can't get out who is an Apple evangelist. So maybe this is something I should check out. Alex, is this something I'm missing out on?
Yeah, I have more to say about Michael Dorn. I will leave the Michael Dorn debacle at a hearty sigh at this point in the episode because I have more to say about it later. Yeah, Legends I haven't played. It looks good. I've watched a couple of gameplay videos and it seems like it's a fun game. The animation style seems fun and the game itself seems fun. And, you know, I'm also, I think the last Star Trek game that I played was Star Trek Elite Force, the first one. That was probably circa 1999. So
that's cool.
It's been a few years.
The last Star Trek game, or in fact, sorry, the only Star Trek game I ever played was DS9 Harbinger. So there you go. That's
my God, that goes back even further. What was that, like 94? I think that game came out.
I've got no idea, but anyway,
it was early.
So,
yeah, I mean, it seems like a fun game. People seem to be enjoying it, and you know, it is fun that they have gotten actors from the franchise, including Michael Dorn, to do a voice on it to kind of, you know, help you immerse yourself in the universe. I just wish that he had rolled it out in literally any other way other than what he ended up doing. But I will reserve further comment on that until later.
I'll look forward to hearing about that.
Okay, so the thing I'm feeling good about Star Trek this week is genuinely something that is super exciting. And we're staying fairly close because we're still talking TNG cast. The thing I am feeling good about this week, it is only tangentially related to Star Trek, but it is for one of our beloved TNG cast members, and that is that LeVar Burton has been announced as one of the guest hosts for Jeopardy here in the US, the TV quiz game show, long time hosted by Alex Trebek, who passed away late last year. And since then, the show has had sort of a revolving cast of guest hosts, and it seems like they have been using those guest hosting duties as an audition for eventually announcing a new permanent host. I like Jeopardy a lot. I didn't grow up with it. It was not on in the UK. Jamie, did they have Jeopardy in Australia?
It's not really an institution the way I kind of get the sense it's an institution in the States. No.
Yeah, I've only come to it in the last 10 years since I've lived here, and it's been on TV all the time, and everybody I know has grown up with it. And so I don't feel the same sort of deep connection to it that everybody else does. But I am thrilled to bits that LeVar will be guest hosting, and have my fingers firmly crossed that if anybody is worthy of taking over that hosting position, that it's LeVar himself. The reason this really resonates with me is the second ever convention I went to was the Creation Star Trek convention in Cherry Hill in, I think it was 2013 maybe, and Patrick Stewart was the big guest, but LeVar was there too. He was sort of the second biggest guest, and I vividly remember him saying at that convention that one of the things that was like his dream would be to take over from Alex Trebek as the host of Jeopardy when he retired, and that was now 10 years ago. So it's not something the guy has come to just in the last 15 minutes. It's something he's been thinking about and interested in for a long time now, and so I'm thrilled for him that it's becoming a reality.
That is fantastic. I did see that. It's also a good news story for the power of the fan base, right? Because a lot of people got behind that little push, and let's hope he does a fantastic job and the creators go, yep, this is our guy. And also just LeVar Burton is awesome. I mean, I just saw something the other day. He did like a little thing with Ryan Reynolds for Aviation Gin, which was funny as well. So man, you can't have too much LeVar Burton in your life. And if that's his dream, and he would be, I mean, I'm sure he would do an amazing job at it. So let's fingers crossed it all goes well.
All right. Well, with that, let's turn to the week's top stories.
There's a war going on, and I'm a reporter.
The various Star Trek shows have been no stranger to the impacts of COVID-19, from post-production conducted entirely at home to delayed shooting schedules for a number of shows. But in recent weeks, we have evidence that the new COVID protocols designed to allow Star Trek shows to return to shooting are being effective at keeping cast and crew safe from harm. At the end of last week, Deadline reported that a guest actor on Star Trek Strange New Worlds had tested positive for COVID-19 shortly before the actor was scheduled to start shooting. As a result of the vigorous testing protocols in place for CBS Studios in Toronto, the guest actor, who had flown in from Vancouver, had not been to set and had only done a costume fitting with a small number of masked crew members before the positive test came back. Contact tracing protocols meant that the crew members the guest interacted with have been asked to self-isolate for their safety and the safety of the rest of the production. Deadline reports that the shooting schedule for Star Trek Strange New Worlds has not been impacted because the positive case was caught early. Jamie, I bet they must be feeling pretty good in Toronto about all the money they're spending on COVID-19 protocols right now, don't you think?
Absolutely. I mean, it's a bit of an issue for Canada at the moment. I understand they're having something of a third wave of cases that's affecting Canada at the moment. I believe they were previously, when we were talking about Trek restarting filming, Toronto and Canada was, one of the places we thought would start up, better and faster than perhaps, Picard in California. And, Canada seems to be undergoing an issue there, and all the best to everyone who's listening from there, and hope everyone's keeping safe. But personally, I'm from a country that's taken COVID really seriously in terms of lockdowns and, government decisions. And I think actually we're the epicenter of Hollywood at the moment. I think just about every single Hollywood production, I think they've just finished Thor and they're moving on to a bunch of other things. There isn't a single piece of, warehouse space that isn't full of movie productions in Australia at the moment. My approach to this is, hey, things might be slower than usual, and we might actually get less Trek in terms of the number of episodes due to the increased cost that it is taking for them to make these shows in a COVID-safe way. But if that keeps people safe, then I'm all for it. And this seems to be a fantastic example of how them structuring the system in the right way is going to allow for them to continue production, not halt, keep things going. Sounds to me slow and steady wins the race, right?
Yeah, absolutely. The cost of everything must be astronomical. And as you say, we're anticipating it's going to have an impact. Obviously, not just the impact that we've seen already around some of these shows should have been done by now if COVID had not happened, but also around the possibility for reduced episode counts. It's not been confirmed that Discovery is going to have fewer episodes this season, but we think it's fairly likely that it probably will. And if there's anything that proves why that's necessary, it's this. I mean, if they had not caught the case until he had been on set, you could potentially see people having gotten sick, right? Because when you reach the point of shooting, they are shooting without wearing masks. And so you are putting people potentially at more danger. And you're potentially looking at cast getting sick. You're potentially looking at more crew getting sick, because even though they have fewer people on the set at any given time, still takes a fair number of people to run a television production. So the fact that they were able to find this positive case, get the guest star isolated, get the crew members he interacted with isolated, and not have an impact on the shooting schedule for the season is really terrific and a credit to the protocols that they've put into place. But yeah, I think you're right, Jamie. You know, for Star Trek Strange New Worlds, the smart move for Aussie representation was not to hire a new Aussie actress. It would have been to move the production entirely down under and shoot everything in Australia, because that seems to be the safe place.
I've got to disagree with you. The safest thing would have been to just cast it with all Australians, you know, and then
and set it down under.
And do both. Yes, that would have been the safest thing. Yeah. Geez, it's been how exciting. We got one and now we have two. I mean, it's Australians are taking over Trek. How good.
Everybody get vaccinated. It's important. And an addendum to our story. We just finished recording with Jamie McGregor. I'm going to cut this back in right around the story. But the news broke. Deadline reported Star Trek Discovery has temporarily shut down Toronto production over offset COVID contact. It sounds like, from reading the article, it's just an extra set of precautions. They have decided to suspend production of Discovery for 2 weeks. Somebody who is in Zone A, which is main cast or main production people like the director, came into contact with somebody away from production who later tested positive for COVID-19. And so as a precaution, everybody in Zone A, so main cast, director, etc., they're all going into self-isolation for 2 weeks and production's going to be shut down. Again, a good sign for Star Trek Discovery's COVID-19 precautions. We've now had a case in Star Trek Strange New Worlds which has not impacted production. We have a case in Star Trek Discovery which has impacted production ever so slightly, but does just appear to be a maximal version of taking extreme caution, which we appreciate the production being so careful with the safety of cast and crew. So yeah, this just broke right as we were recording. So I figured I would just come back in and drop this in. But now back to the episode that I recorded with Jamie 45 minutes ago. Well, since the formal announcement that John de Lancie would be returning to Star Trek Picard in the role of Q, the actor has been pumping out short videos for fans through the Cameo celebrity booking service and dropping hints and nuggets about his involvement in the show along the way. Credit where credit is due to TrekMovie.com for sorting through these videos and pulling out all the details. In a video for a fan named Stacy, de Lancie says, quote, "I guess they really needed someone to come in and really annoy the shit out of Picard, and that is exactly what I have been doing for the last month." He also indicates in videos to other fans that he will be appearing in more than one episode, that he's expected to film for, quote, a while, and that at least one of his episodes will be directed by Jonathan Frakes. But perhaps the most interesting thing de Lancie says in these videos relates to Whoopi Goldberg and her return as Guinan. Since Sir Patrick Stewart asked the actress to return to Star Trek on The View in January of 2020, that was now almost a year and a half ago, we haven't heard much about Whoopi's role, and indeed whether a deal has even been done such that her return is confirmed. Well, John de Lancie seems to indicate that yes, it is happening, saying to Star Trek fans on Reddit through a Cameo video that he's looking forward to, quote, harassing Guinan. He also said he's looking forward to meeting the rest of the Picard cast, which indicates that even though he says he's been filming quite a bit for Picard already, that he has not had any interaction with the Picard cast yet outside of Sir Patrick Stewart. Jamie, what do you think about these little revelations from John de Lancie about his return to Star Trek?
A couple of things here. First off, Cameo seems to be the new way for leaks to get out.
I know.
Which I think the actors don't really realize that this kind of stuff, people do share this when they get these videos. My absolutely awesome sister got me a cameo from Nicole de Boer, actually, recently.
Oh, that's awesome.
I am very disappointed to say that she did not announce an appearance in Star Trek Picard, no matter how many Bajoran historical artifacts pop up in teasers. But, you know, I swear I had messaged you a theory just a little while back about questioning, hey, has there been much about Whoopi Goldberg returning? Because once Q got announced, you know, and of course, Patrick Stewart very famously asked Whoopi Goldberg to return when he was on The View, I hadn't heard anything more. And of course, there aren't too many more iconic TNG scenes than Guinan stabbing Q with a fork in 10 forward, right? And their universal dislike for one another was a thread on the show. So obviously, Q and Guinan go together for a potential plot thread. And so I was saying, I wonder what this actually sounds like. It kind of fits. And then lo and behold, this very week, we hear John Delancey spilling the beans. And I think that there was actually a mention in a Variety interview with Whoopi Goldberg that said that she was preparing to return to set. So it looks like those two things are going to be confirmed. And I don't know about you, but I think everyone needs to go back to that teaser and see if there's a fork lying around in Picard's in his study, just to see whether or not we're going to get a bit of action between those two again. And if so, I cannot wait for it.
It will be really nice. Obviously, if he, is correct about what he's saying, which why wouldn't he be? But we'll leave that kind of caveat out there. Assuming he's correct about what he's saying, it is great, the idea that we will get more Q and Guinan interplay to play off of, and really nice and reassuring and comforting to hear that at least John Delancey seems to think he's working with Whoopi Goldberg, and the Variety reporter who wrote that article seems to think pretty strongly that she's going back to Star Trek, and I doubt the piece would have been published and had that in it if they hadn't at least asked her, like, well, is this still happening? So can we put this in there? So yeah, I think that's great. My guess is we probably will not get too many more John Delancey cameo revelations about Star Trek Picard, because I will imagine within 1 to 2 hours after the TrekMovie.com article going up, I'm fairly certain John would have gotten a phone call from someone at the Star Trek Picard production office saying, hey, John, maybe cool it on handing out too many details via cameos for the next
Maybe Alex
6 months.
Kurtzman sent him a cameo.
Right.
Possibly.
Well, Star Trek Prodigy is critical to the future success of the Star Trek franchise. That is the thesis of some reporting in Variety a couple of weeks ago about streaming wars between the big studios. According to Variety, there was a big internal debate at Viacom CBS about whether Prodigy, the animated kids show that will see the return of Kate Mulgrew as Captain Janeway and a Delta Quadrant setting, should premiere on Nickelodeon as was originally announced, or on Paramount Plus. Ultimately, the show will premiere on Paramount Plus. We found that out at the CBS Investors Day event in February, but the article indicates that Prodigy is viewed by many in the company as, quote, critical to the fate of the Trek franchise, as it's the first bid to engage families, a path that can lead to ancillary products such as toys and theme park rides. Toys and theme park rides, music to the ear of any Star Trek fan who remembers the halcyon days of the 1990s and the extensive line of Playmates action figures and the debut of Star Trek The Experience at the Las Vegas Hilton. Jamie, are you excited by the prospect that Prodigy could kick off a traditional merchandising renaissance for the Star Trek franchise?
Well, obviously the answer to that is yes, because it would provide a weekly stream of content for you to review and talk and think about all the different bits of merchandise that are filling that Bajoran wormhole. But what I would say is, I think the thing that jumped out at me from this story is that it is clear that CBS and Paramount are seeing Trek in its right place as a piece of family entertainment. And there has been, I think, some reaction from the fan base around the existing shows that the Trek that is being provided at the moment, while, certainly fits the wheelhouse for a lot of people, isn't exactly the same kind of tonal provision that the Trek was, where it was watched with, you could easily watch with your kids or with your parents, or, and had a family attachment to them. And I know a lot of Star Trek fans came to Trek through a family attachment or watching with family. And we all know indoctrination starts early. And yes, CBS and Paramount are not doing this out of the goodness of their heart. They want to make money and they know exactly that this is the way to do it. But I still think it's a positive for the franchise. And Prodigy is something squarely in that market, and can't wait to see how not only the show develops, but how they make this accessible and interesting for a younger fan base. And I think I know you've mentioned this on the show many times before, that it's really important that Star Trek brings in new fans and doesn't just cater to the old ones. And it shows that that's exactly where the direction of the franchise is headed. And I think that's exciting, right?
Oh, sure is. And before, there are people out there who will hear comments like yours and say, well, I was 7 years old when I got into Star Trek The Next Generation, and I didn't need it to be a kids-only show in order for me to become a lifelong Star Trek fan. Why are they doing this now when it wasn't necessary to create new fans in the 90s? To which I will say, it's really important to understand that as much as we would still like it to be the 90s, as I recall, it was a pretty nice time. It's not anymore. And the entertainment industry is nowhere close to being the same as it was in the 1990s. If you were a kid in the 90s, you got children's programming on Saturday mornings, and the programming that was on the rest of the time was either sort of family friendly or it was adult oriented, but its content was inoffensive enough that children could watch it and it wouldn't be, sort of a massively taboo thing for that to happen. Today, we're not watching 4 television channels anymore. We're watching thousands of channels, multiple streaming services, with the ability to access all kind of content at any point that you want to, including, most importantly, I think, for where Prodigy is concerned, these ring-fenced areas of the entertainment sphere that are just for children, right? You sign into a streaming service these days and you're immediately hit with the question, are you an adult or are you a kid? And if you're an adult, you go into the adult section of Netflix. And if you're a kid, you go into the kids section of Netflix. And nary the two shall meet, in the sense that if you are a kid in Netflix Kids, you're not going to stumble across Star Trek The Next Generation. You're not going to stumble across Star Trek Voyager. What might you stumble across? You might stumble across Star Trek Prodigy. Why? Because it's created to live in those unique spaces that children have access to in the entertainment sphere right now.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And what's exciting is that the people who are in charge of Trek have identified this and are filling that gap. And you need this to build a proper franchise around. And, we all sat watching, very jealous when Disney Plus announced, I think it was 11 shows in that other Star franchise that you shan't name. And, Trek is not quite there yet, but we need this in order to build the franchise, to keep Star Trek going and to keep it relevant. And, the announcement of a movie yet to be determined fits part of that picture as well, because we need to make sure each of these segments of the entertainment market are catered for if we want Star Trek to survive. And the only other thing I will say was I did read in the article that there is, alas, only one theme park attraction built around Trek in the world, which is somewhere in Germany, still going. Now, that's got to change, surely. Come on, Alex. What can we do to get more theme park attractions Trek-oriented?
Yeah, no, I mean, that's a fabulous point. And I think the other thing, too, you brought up Star Wars. There's always been this thing around, well, Star Trek, quote, doesn't have any merchandise and Star Wars, quote, has all of the merchandise. But, it's funny. I'm not an expert in this space, but I feel like the merchandise world is changing and evolving quite a bit from where it used to be, because even Star Wars, I have seen Star Wars fans beginning to complain in much the same way that Star Trek fans have been complaining for the last decade about a lack of available merchandise. Now, obviously, in the Star Wars realm, they're coming off of it being the biggest merchandising phenomenon ever in the world, ever, will 100% probably hold the record for all time. And them having less of what they once had is almost certainly still more than whatever Star Trek fans had at any given point. But I think the relationship that exists between fandom and the content owners, the studios, and what those merchandising arrangements looks like and what the market looks like, I think it's changing quite a bit. And I think even Disney, colossal merchandising juggernaut that it is and has been, is not pumping out product at quite the same level for its franchises as it used to. Doesn't mean those franchises aren't as successful, right? Because this goes for Marvel too, and Marvel remains the biggest thing ever, probably the biggest IP in the last decade. Star Wars is probably the only thing that gives it a run for its money. Star Trek's in the top 10, but I don't think it's in those top 2. And even they are starting to kind of change the way they approach merchandising. So it just feels like the world is different. I don't know whether it's the fans are different in terms of what they're buying, whether it's the studios are different in terms of what they're deciding to sell. Certainly not a profitability thing, right? Star Trek's very profitable. The amount of merchandise it has today, much less than it was in the 1990s. So, I don't know that we're ever gonna, even if you had a colossally successful Star Trek franchise, I don't think you still would see the sort of merchandising heights that you saw in the 90s. I just don't think that's the world we live in anymore.
Yeah, I think, to be honest, what you're saying is this parallels what you were talking about earlier about the different experience that kids had, 80s, 90s. There is just, the world is different now, and we don't pump out the same degree of necessarily merchandise. The relationships are different, and we have to move with the times. And it's good to see that Trek is doing that as well.
Well, lastly this week, this is a very quick story. Star Trek Discovery Season 3 will be premiering on Blu-ray in the United States on July 20th. Not many details are yet available about the upcoming release. I almost wonder if there was some miscommunication about the announcement, because normally the pre-order links go live on Amazon and you get all of the information about the release date, B, the special features that are included, C, the steelbook. But there was like a 2-line announcement on StarTrek.com saying there was going to be a Blu-ray with none of that, and didn't even have the release date at that point. We've only since learned it in the last week that it's going to be July 20th. But so as of now, no details. So I just think there's some colossal snafu that's happened. No details yet about the upcoming release, but Star Trek Discovery Season 3 will be coming to Blu-ray and DVD. And yes, it is expected to have a steelbook companion release if you are a collector of the steelbooks. And of course, we'll have a number of special features, but those have not yet been revealed. Jamie, do you think you'll be picking up Star Trek Discovery Season 3 on Blu-ray when it makes it down to Australia?
Well, actually, recently we got an upgraded Blu-ray player to play the Peter Jackson, the re-release of the Lord of the Rings trilogy.
Oh, yes.
We did a marathon rewatch for a family member's birthday, and I got to say, extended editions, of course. That was a long day. That was a long day. So look, physical media isn't entirely dead yet, people, I suppose. And for the people 100% working on DS9 and Voyager coming to Blu-ray, secretly, in my dreams, just letting them know that physical media isn't dead. And I would like for them to pack those imaginary Blu-ray releases full of as many special features as possible. And I can't wait to see what special features they put into the Discovery Season 3 Blu-ray, which is at least a real thing that is actually going to happen. So can't wait to see that.
All right. Well, we've talked about the facts, and now let's speculate on what's going to happen in the future of Star Trek.
You make some very good points, Captain. But it's still all speculation and theory.
So each week, I and my guest give you a wish or theory we're nurturing about any of the shows or the future of the franchise. So Jamie, let's hear your theory or wish for this week.
Well, the last time I was on Weekly Trek, my wish was for the Lower Decks characters to appear as their real life counterparts to appear as their Lower Decks characters in a short trek, given their kind of close resemblance. And that seems to have gained some traction with them on Twitter, agreeing to do it at a convention. So let's say I'm on a roll here. I'm going to go with something not as crazy as that, though, this time around. And it's a very low-key theory wish, but I would kind of like the next Trek movie that has been announced, or at least it has a release date, if no other details. I would kind of like it to be a Kelvin-era movie. I totally understand that there are people who are ready to move on from that and do something new, do something different, do something with the franchise that can really be a tentpole movie to send us off in a different direction. But I happened to rewatch the 309 movies just several months ago. I got to say, 2009 was awesome. Into Darkness wasn't anywhere near as bad as I'd remembered, because I don't think I'd actually seen it again since the cinema. And Beyond was just a great installment of Trek. And I just look back at that and think that the actors did such a fantastic job. And I would like to see that world continue in some way, shape or form. Doesn't have to have Chris Hemsworth as another Australian back in Trek if that's the case. But anyway, I have a bit of a soft spot for the Kelvin movies that perhaps I didn't actually even have when they were released in cinemas. And I would like to see that cast reunite. Certainly, all of them have been interviewed on multiple occasions over the many, many years that the fourth movie has been rumored and had aborted starts. But I think they would all want to get together if the money was there and the price was right and the time was right. But anyway, there you go. That would be my wish for the franchise.
I agree. And I think people have been reading too much into comments that Alex Kurtzman made last week or the week before, in which he said, well, I think you need to have some connective tissue between television and movies, or you're asking audiences to accept two kind of completely different, separate versions of the same story at the same time, and that's too complicated for them. Because I actually think that Kurtzman's comments can sit very comfortably alongside another Kelvin timeline movie. And the reason for that is because they have done so much work in the Prime timeline to establish the existence of the Kelvin timeline and the two's relationship to each other, that a Kelvin timeline movie does have connective tissue with the Prime timeline. It's not a separate story. We know it's just a branch of the existing story that is told in a different way. And we have been told that in Star Trek Discovery Season 3, most prominently, right? You're wearing the early TNG uniform, the Time Warrior from the Kelvin timeline, and David Cronenberg's character basically explains what the Kelvin timeline is and how it came to be and the fact that they know all about it, right? Like, I think you can very easily do another Kelvin timeline movie and say, look, it is part of this bigger whole and it's about parallel universes. And it certainly seems like the Marvel Cinematic Universe is heading in the direction of having multiple different universes kind of on offer at any one time and have that all be connected to the same story. So yeah, I'm all for another Kelvin timeline movie. I'm withholding all judgment and all kind of what would I like to see out of the movie until I get more confirmation about it. But I would not be disappointed if they said, this is going to be another Kelvin timeline movie. I think, I would be perfectly comfortable with more, and I would be perfectly comfortable with something new also.
Yes. I hadn't actually thought of it that way. I mean, the Marvel universe certainly is not, it's amazingly successful, and it's not like they have made the timelines particularly easy for audiences to follow, and still they're lapping them up. I hadn't actually thought of Cronenberg's role as kind of being the equivalent of the Ancient One, kind of explaining all of the timelines and how this kind of stuff all works out. But maybe that's his place in the franchise. So maybe there's a parallel there where he can kind of explain how everything interacts and how everything intersects. That's going to propel us into whatever the next movie might be. That'd be cool.
That would be cool. Okay. So my wish for this week is a wish that people who run major celebrities' social media accounts don't do what the person who runs Michael Dorn's Twitter account did over the last week, which is absolutely, completely, colossally, stupendously mishandle the announcement that Dorn was going to be in Star Trek Legends by making a whole hell of a lot of fans think that he was going to be in a TV show. So I have some sources who have let me know that Michael Dorn does not control his own Twitter account, that there is somebody who does his tweets for him. And if you go through his Twitter account, it's not super difficult to figure out who that person is, but this was stupendously, ridiculously, colossally stupid the way this was handled. On Monday, Michael Dorn tweets, "Just got the news, being summoned back into action, Starfleet calls, #ad." Now, you could say, well, it says #ad, so of course that means he's not coming back to Star Trek. But most people who read that tweet did not take it that way. It escalated to the level that major nerd media outlets like IO9 are reaching out to CBS to say, hey, we just saw this tweet. Is Michael Dorn coming back to Star Trek? And CBS has to say no. Trek Movie then went a step further. They reached out to Paramount and asked, is Michael Dorn coming back in a Star Trek movie? And they said no. The whole thing was just colossally mismanaged, because now there are fans who are running around out there who only saw that first tweet, who never saw the final tweet, which was just this morning, Friday the 23rd, which was the full ad that has Star Trek Legends branding on it at the end, who now think that Michael Dorn is one of the people coming back to Star Trek. Do not play with Star Trek fans' hopes and dreams about returning characters like that. Do not do that. That is not fair on them.
They're all now moving at Warp 10.
Exactly. And they're all going to be disappointed when the show comes on and he's not in it because he's just in a video game. And if you look at the video game tweets where it becomes super obvious it's just a video game, there are a ton of disappointed people being like, oh, I thought you were coming back in the show. So I know the actors know this, but if you are, well, not all of them do, because some have said stupid things, flashback to Robert Picardo saying he'd been approached by the producers of Star Trek Picard about making an appearance. Well, that hasn't happened, and that was 2.5 years ago. But if you are somebody who tweets on behalf of a Star Trek celebrity, please recognize you are dealing with a huge audience of people who are very wrapped up in and have a bunch of expectations and hopes and dreams about what's happening with those people. Do not play with them for an ad, right? It's fabulous he's in the video game. But honestly, after the last week, is anybody really all that happy he's in a video game when it was dangled in front of the fandom that he was gonna be in a show? So I'm very angry about this. I think it was totally mismanaged. I think whoever is doing those tweets, Michael should stop allowing them access to his Twitter account and either go back to tweeting himself or stop tweeting entirely. He's a rich man. He doesn't have to be on social media. Go do whatever you want to. So this was a really sad week in that regard. And given that there are so many exciting things for us to look forward to, John Delancey's coming back, Whoopi Goldberg's coming back, LeVar Burton says maybe he's coming back to Star Trek Picard in an interview this week. Just one word, so I didn't think it was that much of a story worth sharing, but, you know, more indication that LeVar's come in. Don't play with people by dangling sort of prospects in front of them when it's for something else entirely. And that's my rant. Jamie, what do you think?
Well, I think first off, we should all recognize that it's good that you don't have, particularly strong feelings about this topic, which is awesome. And I do think, just out of interest, I've got this vague memory that there was another kerfuffle about, had he signed like a clapperboard or something on Star Trek Picard? There was some piece of, he'd been visiting the set or someone had visited the set and everyone thought that was the new. So I would say the fans out there are going to do their research. They're going to try and find any little piece of information. I think that it's best for the Star Trek cast and creators and people to try and hide these things better rather than put them into plain sight. So under-promise and over-deliver. And it seems like Michael Dorn has done the exact opposite in this particular case. And so if you're going to announce something, hide it somewhere where, we're going to be looking anyway, rather than do something as boneheaded as this and give everyone false expectations. So I certainly hear your frustration. And it certainly did send off everyone into a tizzy, and that's not the way that these things need to go.
Do you have a theory or a wish for Discovery, Picard, Strange New Worlds, Lower Decks, or Prodigy that you'd like to share? Tweet them to me at WeeklyTrek or email them to me at weeklytrek@thetricordertransmissions.com, and I might feature your theory in a future episode. Well, that's all the time we've got for this episode of Weekly Trek. Thank you so much to my guest, Jamie McGregor, for joining me today. Jamie, how can people contact you if they want to continue the conversation?
Can be found on Twitter at jmac_ref, JMAC_REF, and always happy to talk Trek with anyone out there.
And you can find this show on Twitter at Weekly Trek and me at Alexander C. Perry. And if you enjoy the show, please consider leaving us a 5-star review on your podcast player of choice. And please check out some of the other great shows on the Tricorder Transmissions. And if you like our shows, please also consider becoming a Patreon of Tricorder, which you can find at patreon.com/the Tricorder Transmissions. And lastly, if you're looking for Star Trek news on the internet, I hope you will turn to trekcore.com. Well, thank you, Jamie. Thank you to all of my listeners. And until next week, live long and prosper.